I was a member of the United States Navy, and I joined first in February 1991, and I enlisted as a corpsman. I served for 7 years and got out. I missed it so much, I came back in. And by then, I was an officer. So I came back in December 2003 as a naval officer.
I was a member of the United States Marine Corps. I joined the service September 18th, 2001.
I served in the United States Marine Corps, and I enlisted in 2005.
I was a service member in the United States Air Force. I joined the service in October of 1987.
The branch of service that I was affiliated with was the United States Air Force. I enlisted on September 17th, 1975. I would go on to serve 33 years, and I would retire in January of 2011 as a colonel in the United States Air Force.
Why did I join the military? I wanted to do something different. First and foremost, I'm a military brat. Both my parents were in the Army officers, and I wanted something a little bit different. I didn't want a regular 9-to-5 job. I wanted something with adventure, and a neighbor of mine was a Navy recruiter, and one day we just sat and talked, and he had me sold by the end. I was in the Navy.
I joined because it was something that I wanted to do since I was a little kid. Since I watched Desert Storm, like being broadcast on every channel.
I decided to join the United States Marine Corps because the recruiters made me feel like I belonged.
I joined because of love for country being one, education being two, and travel to see the world.
During our senior year, the recruiters came around, military recruiters came around. They had Armed Forces Day to take some tests. So I said, I'll take a test. And they came back to me and said, the Air Force guy came up and spoke to me and said, we have a deal for you.
I was in the medical field. I was a medical corpsman, and I worked in a hospital. I worked on a ward mostly, tending to surgical patients. And then the second time around, I was a medical service corps officer. I was a health administrator. And for the most part, I did various jobs under that. But I was the officer in charge of the medical clinic in Camp Lejeune, and then I deployed to Iraq as a supply and logistics officer with 2nd Medical Battalion.
I did call for fires for close air support, artillery, mortars, and naval gunfire. So I basically did what I wanted to do as a child.
My specialty or career specialty in the United States Marine Corps was administrative personnel. I later transitioned to a financial payroll.
During the first half of my career, as a security service, I guarded priority resources around the world, basically communication sites, priority resources, aircrafts, communication crafts, and then when I cross-trained over, I political military analyst. I pretty much did intel briefs for 4- or 5-star generals around the world at different locations, both in the Air Force and in joint service, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine.
As a commissioned officer, I got lucky to come back into the same career field as an officer that I did enlisted work. So my first tour as a 2nd lieutenant was an accounting and finance officer at Charleston Air Force Base. And I just proceeded up through the rank and file of our career field of financial management to assume one of 10 key positions in the United States Air Force as a chief financial officer of a major command. I ended my career as the chief financial officer of the Combat Air Forces down at Langley Air Force Base, Virginia.
I was in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and I deployed February 2005, and I was in Al-Asad, Iraq. We were near the southern border next to Syria. We were right outside of Syria. While I was deployed, I ran the day-to-day operations of the surgical unit. So I was responsible for the staff of 240 people and responsible for pretty much everything from logistics to supply. But most importantly, part of my duties was I was in mortuary affairs. I did mortuary services. I was responsible for medevacing the deceased patients back to the United States. And one of my duties was, as we call them, angels, when they came in, I had to examine the bodies and complete their death certificates, and I had to search their bodies for their belongings and inventory that. And then I had to put them in their body bag. And then I would put a Marine on the door to guard the body while we waited for the morgue to come pick them up. So that was one of my duties, mortuary services.
I am a combat veteran. I was in OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom, so I did serve in a combat role. I was attached to the Royal Marine Commandos unit, Alpha Company Angels, where I spent my time.
I deployed during Operation Enduring Freedom in 2007. I initially requested to deploy as an individual augmentee for United States Marine Corps. About that program, it's where service members individually and independently request to deploy downrange to serve in combat. Initially, I was supposed to go to Africa. However, there was an assignment and an opportunity for me to go to Fallujah, Iraq. When I arrived in Iraq, I was supposed to be serving as a payroll clerk. However, there was a requirement for female Marines to serve as lioness. During that time, I left Fallujah and transitioned to Al-Assad, where I did 2 months of training. Later, I went to Haditha Dam, where I served with 5 other Marines. The initiative going out to Haditha Dam was more for women and children. We were there to protect that part of the community while the infantry units did their normal searches and safety procedures with the Iraqi males.
I did serve in the combat. I served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I served in Operation Enduring Freedom, and I also served in conceptual wars, that's the war on drugs. I deployed numerous times throughout my career, pretty much as an operation, I guess, during the war on drugs. I went to both Colombia and Panama to help with their issues, whether it might be drug trafficking through Panama or insurgency in Colombia. And then I also deployed to Saudi Arabia for Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And then I virtually deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan under the UAV missions.
The closest I got to actually being in combat was here in the States, and I tell people about that, the ability to walk out of the Pentagon on 9/11 when it got hit. I can still, like where I was at that moment, where I was working on a classified skiff in Air Force budget. And I still remember talking to colleagues when we were listening to, at that time, a low-flying plane, because they flew low, taking off a national airport. They flew low over the Pentagon. And so you're talking to this guy, and he said, that plane sounds pretty low. And the next thing you know, you hear this rumbling sound, the Pentagon is shaking. 2 colleagues that had an inner window, you heard this curse word, and what they actually saw, and they didn't know what was going on, was this fireball that had cleared the top of the building. And then the loudspeakers started going off, and things just didn't seem right because we were in a skiff, no one knew what happened at the World Trade Center. And so we were told to evacuate. And I remember going out into the first corridor, and we would take our normal exit as we were supposed to get out of the building. And folks are talking to us about what was happening at the World Trade Center and didn't know this. So normally we would go out the second floor, and we were directed down to the basement, so you knew something was wrong. And I remember talking to a guard as we were coming out and said, what's going on? He says, look to the right as you clear the building. We just got hit by a plane. And so as I cleared the building and looked right, like he said, all I could see was a lot of black smoke coming out of the side, and you could hear the explosions, the secondary explosion of the fuel. It was kind of a harrowing day. But we would go back to work that next day. The building was still on fire, the roof was still on fire. We had instructions on how to get out if the fire couldn't be contained, mainly because the message was that your military was still operational. Although we got hit, we were up and running.
My wartime experience impacted me significantly. First and foremost, it made me realize that life is short. I found resilience in being over there because you learn to adapt and overcome to your environment. You learn what you're seeing. It makes you think differently about life and how short life can be. It greatly impacted my children, especially. They were 7 and 8 at the time when I deployed. And their father, who was my husband at the time, he was in Guantanamo Bay with the detainees. So both their parents were gone at the same time. And it was a world they were never used to because I was a stay-at-home mom, and the next thing you know, I'm at work at war. My daughter fell into a deep depression, and my son developed anger issues. I did 5 months out of a 7-month tour, and then I came back to the States and had to deal with getting my children readjusted.
The wartime situations affected me and my family in different ways. Pretty much we're a strong family, close-knit, so we travel and do everything pretty much together. So the most significant way that it affected us was the distance, the missing of special events, birthdays, anniversaries, and the like. I missed several birthdays. As my younger son was growing up, I missed a larger portion of his life because I deployed more during my second son than my first son's birth and life, so I missed a large portion of his life. That was hard on him because he didn't recognize me a lot of times when I came back, and we had to reintegrate and reestablish that bond, father and son bond. Hard on my wife, his mom, because she had to be pretty much a single parent during the time I was not there. So that's the most significant way I think wartime affected us.
I think for me, serving in wartime impacted me most with my oldest son. He was 5 when I deployed, and I missed about 8 months of kindergarten. So that was something I always felt like was a first-time experience that was lost. As far as my community, it was harder on my mother. I'm one of 9, and my mom went from not watching the news at all to watching it every day. Wartime is something that makes you more engaged. Enlisting in 2005, deploying by 2007, I could almost guarantee every neighbor during that time had a family member, a child, or a friend serving. So it was something that was relatable.
I think the most memorable one for me was not so much at Langley Air Force Base, but when I was the budget director at Air Mobility Command. Our security forces folks were going forward into the combat zone and needed body armor. And we were trying to work a resourcing package to get them body armor, and entered into a funding transfer where we transferred, and hopefully this thing came together where we were able to identify some resources to be transferred in order to get the right color of money so our guys could get body armor. Turned out to be better than I thought, and we wound up getting the right body armor for those guys going forward. You just think you're doing your job and not knowing how you're impacting the lives of people until you leave to go to Langley. And on behalf of the almost 1,300 security forces folks in Air Mobility Command, I got this nice plaque with a bayonet thanking me for what I had done for them. That is displayed in my study because if you know the security forces, they generally do not give non-security forces folks those kinds of gifts, and so that was something special.
Some of the challenges that I faced personally when I came back was I had an inability to really create relationships with other people, which affected my relationship with my family because I come from a relatively close-knit family. And during that time period, I really did not want to be bothered with anyone. When I came back home, I kind of just like to sit in the dark and watch anime or like just I don't know, read, study, something along those lines, but I definitely did not really want to be bothered with other people. I started engaging in semi-reckless behavior, souped up my Acura, carbon fiber, all of this stuff, and just drove ridiculously fast for no reason, and other engaged in similar risky behavior, which, concerned my parents and stuff like that.
Something I've learned about myself is I'm not as much of an introvert as I once thought I was. I feel like I'm a stronger individual. I spent most of my time being raised in Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland. My mom and dad are immigrants from St. Lucia, and we were a very close and sheltered family. Having that exposure, not just outside of Baltimore, but outside the United States, it actually puts things in perspective about how you want to live your life. People in other countries, they actually have a lot more in common with Americans than people would think. There are good people out there, and they will make effort to break bread with you, bring you lunches, bring you meals, invite you in their homes, and we want the same things.
I think what I learned most about myself during times of war is basically that I'm stronger than I thought I was. A lot of times you feel isolated and alone in those situations, even though you have a great team around you. You feel like an individual on a desert island, for the lack of a better word. So I learned that I had a lot of stuff that I had to get to know me a little bit better. And once I established those, getting to know me, I felt that any external forces were irrelevant. I got to know me. I was well versed with myself, and I felt better about myself. So that was one of the biggest challenges of deploying and being away during that time.
First and foremost, I had to be grateful for the fact that I returned all together. I put 7 bodies in the bags. That's 7 families that will not be seeing their relatives again. So first and foremost, thankful. Then a lot of readjustment and reassuring, especially for the children, that it was just a job. It's over, it's done with, and I won't be doing that again. And working with them, but we did have to go to family therapy for a while, extensively, for both of them to really adjust. My daughter had the hardest time because actually the week I returned home, one of her classmates' fathers was killed in Iraq. And by them living on base, they knew, they weren't hidden somewhere, they knew what was going on and they knew where I was. So partly just from then on, just being there for them, being there for Brownie troop meetings and Little League football, baseball, just being there really helped.
What I really learned was a lot of people don't necessarily understand that world and how it affects someone. When they see you, they basically just see a person who did, X, when in reality, the thing like X really, you can see the pictures from X. Like, it never really leaves you. The trick is to just accept what is and just be strong. And I learned that I'm a pretty strong person and I can persevere through pretty much anything. So definitely been able to continue to do the things that I want to do. So been lucky enough to do that.
How did my military experience impact the current job? Well, your military experience is transferable. I think the immediate impact when I got here at Commerce was called out to me when people found, hey, this guy is pretty straightforward and direct. And in the military, you need to be straightforward and direct, clear, concise, and to the point. Mainly because you don't want people dying, or you want to make sure that people get commander's intent. They understand what's being said, and the most precious thing that people have is their time. You can pay people overtime for staying. You can apologize for this or that, but you can't replace anyone's time that you waste. And so I'm very sensitive to that. And the military, it really hones you in on what's important, tell people what's clear and concise, what you need them to do, and then we drive on. And that's what I think, if you talk to anybody at Commerce, they will tell you I'm pretty direct and open. And sometimes doing what's right isn't popular, but that's why I think they brought me in here, to make sure we get a mission done.
The skill that I acquired while serving the United States Marine Corps is not only discipline, but also communication. Discipline is what I believe helped me reach my goals within the federal government, but it's the communication of working with people who serve as my supervisors as well as my subordinates for me to be effective in my role. It is the understanding of how, as a service member, I started off as an entry level, promoted up, so the building blocks are still there. It's just framed or designed a little bit differently.
Pretty much I grabbed and brought all those aspects, security aspects, political, military analysis aspects with me when I came to Commerce. My role, the job that I originally got was with the Strategic Intelligence Division within Commerce, and we pretty much vet foreign entities on licenses, export licenses. So that role pretty much meant that we had to use all those aspects, use my security know-how as well as my political, military analysis as far as what countries are doing, where are they looking at, and how are they doing it.
My military experience impacted me professionally by instilling in me assurance, a sense of awareness of knowing that I can face challenges, difficult situations that arise, how to adapt and to overcome. Part of my duties, I was also a training officer, so that definitely correlates to what I do now here at Commerce. As a company commander, you're always training and mentoring your folks, and that's what I do here. So I think that the greatest impact the military provided was, I think, self-awareness and assurance of being able to get things done and take on more. It gave me opportunity to grow more and take on more responsibility.
Black History Month is a month to actually acknowledge how far we've come, acknowledge what role I've played in serving for my country, and being able to be recognized for my personal accomplishments.
As I look at African American History Month, it is trying to be a good role model of a man of color. Not trying to get into a lot of the politics or anything like that, but I take that very seriously, especially coming out of the military and what I bring forward. You just never know any particular day when you come to work or going home whose life you might impact or change their perception of African Americans.
As a black male, it really is an important thing because a lot of people don't necessarily see African Americans in positive light throughout the year, especially the way that the system portrays black males particularly is usually in a negative light. You usually see them on TV in handcuffs or portrayed in TV shows as some type of a criminal. Primarily, they never are in the hero role. So an opportunity to show and showcase different aspects of the African American community is important. And to me, Black History definitely plays a role in doing that on a national level.
I believe that the purpose of Black History Month is to pay homage. As I went through the military, I noticed that my job was pretty much broken ground by people that were before me. A lot of them were African American men and women who had struggled, fought through being isolated, both physically and mentally, segregated against, and Black History Month is paying homage to those individuals who paved the way for me to do what I'm doing today.